Some old games have aged like fine wine. These are the games that will not feel dated in the slightest, even though they are many years old at this point. So let's look at the first game. Alright, let's talk about Quantum Break. Developed by Remedy Entertainment, the same folks behind Alan Wake and Control, Quantum Break is kind of like a mind-bending mashup of a sci-fi thriller and a time-bending action game. I remember when this game first dropped, it was all about that unique mix of gameplay and live-action episodes, which was a pretty ambitious move back then. You play as Jack Joyce, who gets caught in a time experiment gone wrong. The whole deal with time manipulation, freezing enemies, rewinding bullets, and all that cool stuff makes combat feel pretty fresh. It's not just about the mechanics though, it's also about the story. The live action parts might seem a bit cheesy now, but they added this extra layer of depth and immersion that was pretty novel. One thing that stands out to me is the way the story branches out based on your choices. It's like watching a TV show where you get to control the action. And despite its age, the game's visuals still pop, thanks to some slick effects and a solid art direction. Sure, the concept might not be as mind-blowing as it was in 2014, but it's still a great example of how blending different media can create a unique experience. If you missed Quantum Break the first time around, now's a good time to revisit it. It's one of those games that's aged well and still offers a good chunk of entertainment. Plus, it's fun to see how some of those storytelling techniques hold up in today's gaming landscape. Alright, let's dive into Metro Redux. If you're into post-apocalyptic settings with a side of intense survival horror, this one's a classic. It's essentially a re-release of Metro 2033 and Metro Last Light, polished up with new graphics and gameplay tweaks that make them feel fresh even a decade later. The original Metro 2033 dropped us into the grim underground world of the Moscow metro system, where humanity's left clinging to life after a nuclear apocalypse. You're not just fighting mutants and hostile survivors, you're also dealing with the claustrophobic, eerie atmosphere that makes every step feel like a gamble. Then you've got Metro Last Light, which continues the story with a bit more action but retains that same gritty, immersive feel. The Redux bundle updates both games with improved visuals and gameplay enhancements that make them feel fresh even a decade later. What's cool about the Redux version is how it keeps the core of what made the original game stand out, while smoothing out some of the rough edges. The flashlight mechanics, gas mask maintenance, and resource scarcity create this palpable tension that really hooks you in. And the story, oh man, it's dark and thought-provoking, with characters and choices that really hit home. So if you're into a deep, atmospheric experience and missed these games the first time around, the Redux collection is a solid pick. It's a reminder of how good the Metro series has always been and how well it holds up with a bit of polish and refinement. Watch Dogs turns 12, and it's wild to think about how it set the stage for a new kind of open-world game back in 2014. This one's a bit of a nostalgic trip, especially if you remember when the idea of hacking your way through a city was as fresh as it gets. You step into the shoes of Aiden Pierce, a hacker with a vendetta and a knack for turning every piece of tech into his personal playground. The game is set in a fictionalized version of Chicago, and let me tell you, the whole hacking mechanic was pretty groundbreaking at the time. You could mess with traffic lights, eavesdrop on conversations, and even turn security cameras into your own little network of intel. The story is kind of a classic revenge tale. Aiden's after the people who messed with his family. It's not the most original plot, but it serves as a decent backdrop to the game's tech-heavy gameplay. The real star here was the ability to hack almost anything, which made you feel like you were part of this high-tech espionage thriller. Graphically, it was a stunner for its time, although looking back now, you might notice a few rough spots. Still, the city felt alive and reactive, and the hacking system was both innovative and a lot of fun. You could choose to be a stealthy hacker or go full throttle with the action, which gave the game a lot of replay value. Watch Dogs might not be the smoothest ride compared to its sequels, but it's definitely worth checking out if you want to see where the whole hacking and open world craze started. It's like taking a trip back to when this kind of gameplay was still a cool new idea, and it's fun to see how far the series has come since then. Wolfenstein: The New Order is a perfect example of how to breathe new life into a classic franchise. This game made a huge splash in 2014 by reimagining the Wolfenstein series with a fresh perspective and a whole lot of punch. Set in an alternate history where the Nazis won World War II, the game drops you into a dystopian nightmare filled with futuristic weaponry and oppressive regimes. You play as BJ Blazkowicz, a grizzled soldier trying to take down the Nazi regime with a mix of sheer muscle and a surprisingly deep narrative. The story here is pretty remarkable. It's not just about blowing up bad guys, though there's plenty of that. It's also about exploring the personal struggles of Blazkowicz as he navigates a world where hope is in short supply. The game weaves in some genuinely touching moments and strong character development, which is something you might not expect from a shooter. The gameplay is a blast, literally. You've got a range of weapons at your disposal, from classic guns to some truly outlandish stuff that feels like it belongs in a sci-fi movie. The combat is intense and satisfying, and the level design is top-notch, offering a variety of ways to tackle each mission. You can go full Rambo or sneak around and take down enemies quietly. It's up to you. Visually, the game holds up well with its gritty, stylized aesthetic that fits the alternate history setting perfectly, and the soundtrack, it's a blast, pumping up the adrenaline as you tear through the ranks of the Nazi army. Wolfenstein: The New Order might be a decade old, but it's still a fantastic ride. It's a reminder of how well classic franchises can be revitalized with a mix of great storytelling and solid gameplay. If you haven't played it yet, or if it's been a while since you last did, it's definitely worth revisiting. Infamous Second Son launched in 2014. It was a PlayStation 4 launch title that managed to show off the new console's capabilities in some pretty impressive ways. In this game, you step into the shoes of Delsin Rowe, a guy who suddenly discovers he has superpowers. Delsin's abilities are all about controlling different elements: smoke, neon, and video, among others. Each power has its own set of moves and perks, which makes gameplay really diverse and engaging. Plus, the visual effects when you're using these powers are nothing short of stunning. The story is set in a near-future Seattle, and while it does tread some familiar superhero territory, government conspiracies, moral dilemmas, and the whole "with great power comes great responsibility" shtick, it's done with a lot of style. Delsin is a pretty interesting protagonist with a mix of charm and rebelliousness that keeps things entertaining, and the game gives you choices that actually matter, affecting how the story unfolds and how characters react to you. The open world of Seattle is not just a backdrop but a playground. Climbing walls, running across rooftops, and using your powers to navigate the city make for a dynamic experience. The side missions are pretty fun, and there's a lot to do if you like collecting stuff and exploring. Graphically, Infamous Second Son was a stunner back in the day, showcasing the PS4's power with detailed environments and flashy effects. The soundtrack and voice acting are also top-notch, adding to the overall immersive experience. Overall, Infamous Second Son holds up well after a decade. It's a fun ride with great powers, a solid story, and an impressive open world to explore. If you're into superhero games or just looking for a good time with some cool powers, this one's worth checking out. Telltale's The Walking Dead, this episodic adventure game kicked off in 2012 and really set the bar for narrative-driven games with its gripping storytelling and complex characters. You play as Lee Everett, a convicted felon who finds himself in the middle of the zombie apocalypse, but the real heart of the game is Clementine, a young girl Lee takes under his wing. The bond between Lee and Clementine is central to the story, and it's one of the most emotionally charged relationships in gaming. Watching Clementine grow and develop throughout the series is a journey in itself, and it's something that really sticks with you long after the credits roll. The game is divided into 5 episodes, each one pushing the story forward with tough choices and moral dilemmas. The choices you make really matter, affecting the story and how characters interact with you. It's a game where every decision feels heavy, and the consequences can be both heartbreaking and rewarding. Graphically, it's got that distinct Telltale style, kind of like a moving comic book with its cel-shaded art. It might not have been the most technically advanced game at the time, but the art style suited the tone of the game perfectly and helped to create an atmosphere that felt both gritty and personal. Even after a decade, Telltale's The Walking Dead is still a standout in the world of narrative games. It's a powerful reminder of how video games can tell stories in deeply moving ways, and it's definitely worth revisiting if you haven't played it in a while. If you're a fan of stories that pack an emotional punch and make you think, this one's a must-play. Beyond Two Souls. This game, created by Quantic Dream, is like an interactive movie with some really intriguing elements. It's been a bit of a mixed bag for some, but there's definitely something special about it. You follow the life of Jodie Holmes, who has a unique psychic connection to an invisible entity named Aiden. The story dives into Jodie's life from childhood to adulthood, with a lot of focus on her struggles and the supernatural events tied to her connection with Aiden. It's all about emotional depth and personal experience, and the narrative unfolds in a non-linear fashion, so you're jumping between different moments of Jodie's life, piecing together her story as you go. Gameplay-wise, it's a mix of quick-time events and exploration. You'll be making decisions that affect how the story unfolds, but a lot of the experience is about being immersed in the narrative rather than traditional game mechanics. The supernatural elements add a unique twist, with Aiden's abilities allowing you to interact with the environment in ways that are both fascinating and sometimes a bit puzzling. Visually, the game has a cinematic quality with impressive graphics and a soundtrack that complements the emotional tone of the story. It's not the most action-packed game out there, but it makes up for it with a compelling narrative and a deep dive into Jodie's life. If you're into games that focus heavily on story and character, Beyond Two Souls is worth checking out. It might not be for everyone, especially if you're looking for traditional gameplay, but its narrative richness and emotional depth make it a standout piece in the interactive drama genre. Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor. If you somehow missed Shadow of Mordor in the last decade, now's the perfect time to see what all the fuss was about. Released back in 2014, this game managed to make waves with its unique blend of Tolkien's universe and some seriously innovative gameplay mechanics. At its core, Shadow of Mordor is an action-adventure game set in the richly detailed world of Middle-earth. But it's not just another trip through the Shire or Rivendell. You're stepping into the shoes of Talion, a ranger with a tragic backstory involving a slaughtered family and a magical bond with a wraith. This connection gives you some pretty wild abilities and sets the stage for a revenge-fueled quest. The main feature of the game is the Nemesis system. It's this clever mechanic that creates a dynamic world where orc captains and warlords remember your past encounters. If you get killed by an orc or run into one again after a while, they'll recognize you, mock you for your previous defeat, and may even have risen in the ranks. It's a cool way to make each encounter feel personal and impactful. The combat system is fluid and satisfying, drawing heavy inspiration from the Batman Arkham series, but with its own twist. You'll find yourself stringing together slick combos and using a range of abilities to take down hordes of enemies. It's fast-paced and visually impressive, making every battle feel intense. Exploration in Shadow of Mordor is pretty engaging, with plenty of side quests and collectibles to keep you busy. The world is designed with verticality in mind, allowing you to climb and traverse the environment in a way that adds a lot to the gameplay experience. Plus, the story, while not reinventing the wheel, is solid and ties well into the broader lore of Middle-earth. Graphically, the game still holds up surprisingly well. The environments are gritty and atmospheric, capturing the dark and menacing tone of Mordor effectively. Character models and animations have aged, but the overall presentation is still immersive. The game's strength lies in its innovative systems and engaging combat, making it a memorable entry in the action-adventure genre. If you're a fan of Tolkien's world or just love a good open-world game with some fresh mechanics, Shadow of Mordor is definitely worth a look. It's a fun, action-packed experience that's aged well and remains a standout title in the last decade. Batman Arkham Knight is the third and final chapter in Rocksteady's critically acclaimed Arkham series, and it's a game that, despite being a decade old, still leaves a lasting impression. Released in 2015, it closed out the trilogy with a bang, delivering a game that truly felt like a grand finale. The game picks up where Arkham City left off, with Gotham City in chaos and Batman facing one of his most dangerous foes yet, the Arkham Knight. This new antagonist has a personal vendetta against the Dark Knight and brings a fresh layer of tension and mystery to the story. From the get-go, Arkham Knight is visually stunning. The open-world Gotham City is expansive and detailed, and you'll find yourself lost in the dark, rain-soaked streets teeming with activity. The game's graphics were top-notch for its time, and while some elements may look dated now, the atmosphere and design still managed to captivate. The combat system, which Rocksteady perfected in the previous games, is as fluid and exhilarating as ever. You'll be diving into combat sequences that are both fast-paced and satisfying, chaining together attacks and using gadgets to outsmart and overpower enemies. There's something undeniably thrilling about taking down a group of thugs while gracefully flipping through the air. One of the most significant additions to Arkham Knight is the Batmobile. It's a cool concept in theory. You can now speed through Gotham and engage in high-octane vehicular combat. While it's a blast to drive around, the Batmobile's frequent use in combat and puzzle solving can feel a bit overdone, and some might find it a bit of a distraction from the core Batman experience. The narrative is a strong point of the game, offering a deep dive into Batman's world and relationships. The Arkham Knight himself is a well-crafted villain with a compelling backstory, and the game provides satisfying conclusions to various plot threads established in the previous games. While the game did receive some criticism for its overuse of the Batmobile and a few repetitive side missions, it still stands as a solid conclusion to the Arkham series. The sense of scale, the richly detailed world, and the epic story make Arkham Knight a memorable title that's worth revisiting even after all these years. In short, if you're a fan of Batman or just looking for a well-crafted open-world game with engaging combat and a gripping story, Batman Arkham Knight is definitely worth your time. It may be a decade old, but it's still a standout experience that showcases Rocksteady's knack for creating immersive superhero adventures. Alright, so let's talk about Sunset Overdrive, a game that kind of came and went, but is definitely worth a second look. It's like the developers took every cool idea they had, threw it into a blender, and then hit the hyper button. The game's set in a vibrant, over-the-top city where a disastrous energy drink has turned everyone into freaky mutants. And oh boy, the mutants are just the start. You're a part of this quirky gang of survivors trying to make the best of a bad situation. The storytelling is cheeky and full of attitude, not taking itself too seriously, which is a breath of fresh air. Gameplay-wise, it's all about speed and style. You're grinding on rails, bouncing off walls, and shooting with a flair that makes you feel like the coolest superhero ever. It's not just about moving fast, it's about moving with personality. The game's combat and traversal systems are a joy to master, and the sheer variety of weapons keeps things spicy. There's a real joy in finding just the right weapon for a particular batch of mutants, and trust me, there are some wacky options. The city itself is a playground with a ton of side missions and collectibles to keep you busy if you want. The world's a little chaotic and maybe a bit overwhelming at times, but that's part of the charm. You get to embrace the chaos and have a blast doing it. Honestly, Sunset Overdrive is one of those games where you just kind of have to let yourself go and enjoy the ride. It might not have set the world on fire when it first came out, but it's got a personality and an energy that's hard to ignore. If you missed it the first time around, give it a shot. It's a fun, offbeat adventure that deserves more love. Okay, let's dive into Ryse, Son of Rome, a game that's like the epic action movie of video games, complete with all the gladiatorial grandeur you could ask for. It's got that big cinematic vibe written all over it. Picture this, you're a Roman soldier fighting through the ancient world, all while the game tries to give you the most dramatic and over-the-top experience possible. First off, the visuals. Man, they're pretty stunning, especially for when it came out. The game was a launch title for the Xbox One, so it's got that early next-gen sheen. The environments and character models look like they've been pulled straight from a Hollywood blockbuster. The blood and gore are right up there with the best of them, making every fight look like a brutal ballet. Now, the combat. It's pretty much the definition of button mashing with a few more bells and whistles. You've got this whole press the right buttons at the right time mechanic going on, which can be both satisfying and a bit repetitive. It's cool at first, feeling like you're right in the middle of a grand arena, but it can start to feel a little monotonous as the game goes on. The story? Well, it's a classic revenge tale. You're fighting for justice and glory in the midst of political intrigue and betrayal. It's not exactly breaking new ground, but it's engaging enough to keep you invested. The voice acting and motion capture do a decent job of bringing the drama to life, even if the plot sometimes feels like it's borrowing from every epic historical drama you've ever seen. One of the highlights is definitely the finishers, those brutal, over-the-top kill moves that let you take down enemies in style. They never get old, and there's something inherently satisfying about watching your character deliver the final blow in such a cinematic fashion.
Prince of Persia: Sands of the Time. So Prince of Persia: Sands of Time came out in 2003, and honestly, this game still rocks. The main thing that makes it special is that rewind time mechanic with the dagger. You mess up a jump, and instead of starting over, you just rewind a few seconds and try again. It's such a simple idea, but it works perfectly and keeps the game from getting frustrating. The movement in this game was insane for its time. The prince just flows through levels, running on walls, swinging on poles, doing flips and all that parkour stuff. Even now, it looks smooth and feels good to control. A lot of games from 2003 are clunky as hell when you go back to them, but this one still plays great because the core mechanics are solid. The whole game takes place in this massive palace, and you're basically solving these big environmental puzzles. You gotta figure out how to get from one area to another using all your moves. The level design is really smart, and when you nail a tough section, it feels awesome. The palace looks cool too, with all that Persian architecture and style that gives it its own vibe. Combat is pretty basic, but it gets the job done. You fight these sand monster things, and you can slow down time or do acrobatic attacks. It's not super deep, but it looks stylish and breaks up the platforming nicely. The dagger powers make you feel badass, which is what matters. What really makes this game stand out is the story presentation. The prince narrates everything like he's telling you this tale, and it just works so well. His voice is great, and the writing is actually good. When you die and rewind, he'll say stuff like, "No wait, that didn't happen," which is a clever way to tie the gameplay into the story. His relationship with Farah develops throughout the game, and you end up caring about both characters. The atmosphere is top-notch. The music has that Middle Eastern sound that fits perfectly. The palace feels mysterious and ancient with all these traps and secrets everywhere. It just sucks you in and makes you want to keep exploring. Yeah, the graphics are super dated now, textures are blurry and models are basic, but the gameplay holds up so well that you stop noticing after a while. The platforming is responsive, controls are tight, and the puzzles are clever. That's what matters more than fancy graphics anyway. The game respects your brain too. It doesn't spam markers telling you exactly where to go. You gotta look around and figure out the path yourself, which feels way more rewarding. The pacing is solid, no filler or padding, just a focused adventure that takes about 10 hours. This game basically invented the parkour action game formula that tons of games copied later. Assassin's Creed took massive inspiration from it. But even with all those games that came after, Sands of Time still holds up on its own because the execution is just that good. Playing it now is still fun as hell. The movement feels great, rewinding time never gets old, and the story keeps you hooked. Good game design doesn't age, and this is proof of that. Prince of Persia: Sands of Time is a classic that's still worth playing even 20 years later. Uncharted 2: Among Thieves. So, Uncharted 2: Among Thieves came out way back in 2009, and this game is still absolutely incredible, even today. Like, seriously, when you boot this thing up now, it barely feels like it came from the PlayStation 3 era, because Naughty Dog just nailed everything about it. The visuals in this game were mind-blowing when it dropped, and honestly, they still hold up really well. The way Nathan Drake moves through these environments, climbing up ancient temples and jumping across crumbling buildings, it all still feels smooth and natural. The environments are packed with detail and color, from the snowy mountains in Tibet to the lush jungles and busy city streets. Nothing feels empty or lifeless, even after all these years. But what really makes Uncharted 2 age like fine wine is the storytelling and characters. Nathan Drake is just such a likable guy. He cracks jokes and gets himself into these crazy situations, but you actually care about what happens to him. The banter between him and the other characters feels real and natural, not like those stiff, awkward conversations you get in older games. The action set pieces in this game are legendary. That opening scene where you wake up in a train hanging off a cliff immediately hooks you in. Then you got moments like escaping from a collapsing building while a helicopter is shooting at you, or that insane convoy chase through the streets where you're jumping between trucks and fighting bad guys. These moments were incredible in 2009, and they're still thrilling to play through today because they're designed so well. The pacing never lets up, and you always feel like you're in this epic action movie. As for the gameplay itself, it's nothing too crazy, but smooth, and has a perfect balance between shooting, climbing, and puzzle solving. The gunfights are punchy and satisfying. The platforming is fun without being too challenging. Well, unless you are playing on brutal difficulty, then it becomes even harder than some Souls games, to be honest. But anyway, the point is, many games from that era feel really clunky now when you go back to them, but Uncharted 2 still feels responsive and tight. The controls just work, and you're never fighting against the game itself. The level design deserves a lot of credit too. Every chapter feels different and takes you to a new location with its own vibe. You go from museums to war-torn cities to mountain villages to ancient temples, and it never gets boring. The game keeps throwing you new scenarios, so you're always excited to see what comes next. Even replaying it years later, those locations still feel fresh and exciting to explore. One thing that really stands out when you play it now is how focused the whole experience is. The campaign is like 10 to 12 hours and every single part of it matters. There's no filler, no boring fetch quests, no padding to artificially make the game longer. You just go from one awesome set piece to the next, and the pacing never drags. In a time where every game wants to be 50 hours long with a million icons on the map, Uncharted 2 feels refreshing because it tells its story and ends at the right time. Uncharted 2 basically set the template for action-adventure games that came after it. You can see its influence all over the place in modern games. It proved that you could make a game that felt like playing through a summer blockbuster movie while still having solid gameplay mechanics. Tons of games tried to copy this formula, but very few pulled it off as well as Naughty Dog did here. Also, technically, when the game came out, Naughty Dog squeezed every last drop of power out of the PS3 hardware, and it shows. Uncharted 2 is one of those rare games that just got everything right. The action, the story, the characters, the visuals, the pacing, it all comes together into this perfect package that's just as fun to play now as it was back in 2009. It's the kind of game that reminds you why you love video games in the first place. Whether you played it when it first came out or you're discovering it for the first time today, it delivers an incredible adventure that never gets old. That's why it's aged like fine wine and will probably continue to be amazing for years to come.
Pretty good shot for a journalist.
Titanfall 2. From the very start, Titanfall 2 throws you into a world that's fast, loud, and completely insane. You're not just running around shooting people like every other shooter. The game gives you crazy movement tools that make you feel like a superhero. You can run on walls, jump really high, slide under bullets, and chain moves together in a way that makes you feel smart and powerful. And then there's the Titans, these giant walking robots that are huge, heavy, and so satisfying to control. You're not just in a mech for show. You fight side by side with your Titan, and it actually feels like a partner. You watch it move, follow your orders, and cover you in combat, and that relationship just makes the game feel alive. Also, the story is actually so good here. You play as Jack Cooper, a normal soldier who suddenly has to bond with a Titan named BT. At first it's awkward, but by the end you actually feel like you're a team. The writing isn't super deep or complicated, but it works because the characters feel real in their own way. The missions in the campaign are unforgettable. One moment you're doing insane parkour across huge buildings, the next you're inside a moving train trying to figure out a puzzle while under fire. The level design is clever. Every map has little tricks and secrets that reward you if you explore. You feel creative because the game lets you tackle fights in different ways. Sometimes sneaky, sometimes all-out crazy shooting, sometimes switching between you and your Titan to pull off cool combos. Even the small details make it memorable. The way the guns feel heavy but responsive, the way the Titans stomp and shake the ground, the way explosions look huge but never confusing, the game never feels unfair. You always know what's going on, but it keeps pushing you to be better. Graphics-wise, it still looks good. The levels have bright colors, futuristic cities, forests, and war-torn bases that all feel different. The sounds hit hard too. The clank of Titans, gunfire, explosions, even the hum of the engines make you feel like you're really in the middle of all this chaos. Titanfall 2 doesn't try to be flashy for no reason. It just makes everything you do feel satisfying. You never get bored because it's fast, clever, and full of surprises. Find new tricks, new paths, new moments that you didn't notice the first time. That's why Titanfall 2 aged so well. Because it's not just basic shooter. The game makes you feel fast, smart, and powerful. And every mission, every fight, every jump feels exciting. It's still the kind of game that makes you want to play it all the way through again. GTA 4. This game is still one of the best in the series, even though a lot of people overlook it now. Rockstar went for something way more serious and grounded compared to the crazy over-the-top stuff in GTA 5, and honestly, it paid off. The story is what really sets this one apart. You play as Niko Bellic, this Eastern European immigrant who comes to Liberty City chasing the American dream, but instead of finding success, he gets pulled into the criminal underworld trying to survive and find the guy who betrayed him back in the war. The writing is genuinely good, and Niko is probably the most well-written protagonist in any GTA game. He's not just some psycho who loves killing, he's actually conflicted about the violence, and you can tell he's tired of this life. His conversations with his cousin, Roman, and other characters feel real and have actual depth to them. Liberty City itself is incredible. It's based on New York, and it actually feels like a real city. The buildings look lived in, and the whole place has this gritty atmosphere. It's not as colorful or sunny as Los Santos, but that's the point. The city feels cold and harsh, which matches the tone of the story perfectly. Even now, the city design holds up because it feels authentic. The physics in this game are still unmatched. The car handling has actual weight to it, vehicles feel different from each other, and crashes are brutal and realistic. Yeah, it takes some getting used to if you're coming from GTA 5 where everything is more arcadey, but once it clicks, the driving feels so satisfying. Cars bounce and roll realistically when they crash, and the damage modeling is still impressive today. The ragdoll physics are hilarious and amazing. Shooting someone or hitting them with a car sends them flying in realistic ways. Getting into car chases and watching enemies tumble across the hood never gets old. The Euphoria physics engine they use just makes everything feel more dynamic and unpredictable. Also, I'd say the combat is solid and more tactical than other GTA games. The cover system works well, and gunfights actually require you to think a bit instead of just running in guns blazing. Headshots matter and enemies react realistically when you shoot them. It's not the most advanced shooter mechanics, but it gets the job done and feels weighty. GTA 4 gets criticized for being too serious or the gameplay being too slow, but that's exactly what makes it age well. It tried something different and actually pulled it off. The story is mature and well told, the city feels real, and the physics are still the best in the series. Playing it now feels refreshing because it's not trying to be a theme park like GTA 5. It's a focused crime drama that happens to be in a video game. The characters are memorable, and Liberty City is still one of the best open-world settings ever made. GTA 4 aged like fine wine because it prioritized storytelling and atmosphere over just being wacky and over the top. It's a different kind of GTA, but it's aged better than people give it credit for.
Yes, I can make this filthy woman fall under my dominion. Oh, Ryse, yes! Eat shit! Oh, oh, Laurel! Laurel! Oh, you're a quadriplegic.
Witcher 3: The Wild Hunt. The Witcher 3 is one of those rare games that just doesn't feel old at all. You look at it now, years after it came out, and it still hits in almost every way. The story's huge, full of crazy twists, and it's the kind of story that actually sticks with you. You play as Geralt, a monster hunter. And yeah, you're out hunting monsters, but it's way more than that. You're traveling across this massive world, meeting people with their own lives, helping some, ignoring others, and every choice feels like it actually matters. Some decisions can bite you later, some feel really rewarding, and that's the kind of writing that makes a game timeless. Even side quests feel special. You're not just killing 5 rats or running fetch quests, you might be helping a merchant with a problem that turns out to be darker than it first looks, or finding a lost kid who changes your story in a small but memorable way. The world is insane. You can ride your horse through forests, swampy lands, or snowy mountains, and each place feels different and alive. Cities feel real, full of people arguing, merchants shouting, guards patrolling, and sometimes chaos happening just in the background. The attention to detail is wild. You can just wander for hours and stumble into something interesting, and it still feels like an adventure, not filler. The weather and day-night cycle make it feel alive too. A sunny day feels peaceful, a rainy night feels tense, and hunting monsters at night in the fog is genuinely scary even today. Combat is another reason it aged so well. It's not some simple point and shoot. You have to plan, prepare your gear, pick the right sword, use magic signs, drink potions, and even set traps. Every fight feels like a puzzle in its own way, especially the big monsters. You can't just button mash, you have to think. And because there's so much variety in enemies, it never gets boring. Every fight feels satisfying, tense, and exciting. Even the visuals, voice acting, and music still hold up. Forests look dense, rivers shine, villages feel lived in, and the music is so good, it really sets the mood for every scene. Geralt's world is messy, dangerous, but also beautiful. And it's that mix that makes the game still feel alive today. Basically, The Witcher 3 aged like fine wine because it got almost everything right. Story, world, characters, combat, and even the little details you notice when you're just wandering around. You can jump back into it now and it still feels massive, exciting, and completely alive. You can replay quests, wander into new areas, and discover stuff you missed the first time. That's why it's still one of the best games ever made, and why it holds up even today.
In one piece. I shall be waiting.
Rise of the Tomb Raider. So Rise of the Tomb Raider came out in 2015, and this game is absolutely stunning even today. Crystal Dynamics took everything that worked in the 2013 reboot and just made it better in every way. The visuals in this game are still jaw-dropping. You're exploring these snowy mountains in Siberia, and the environments are gorgeous. The way snow looks and behaves is insane. Laura leaves footprints that actually sink in realistically, and snow clings to her clothes and hair. The lighting is beautiful, especially when sun breaks through the trees and frozen forests. Even now, this game can compete with stuff that came out recently because the art direction and technical work are just that good. The tombs in this game are finally actual tombs worth exploring. The 2013 game was criticized for not having enough tomb raiding, and Ryse fixed that completely. The optional tombs you find are these massive puzzle-filled areas that feel like actual ancient ruins. You're figuring out how to use physics and the environment to reach treasure, and it's so satisfying when you solve them. These tombs are the highlight of the game, and they really make you feel like you're discovering something that's been hidden for centuries. The gameplay loop is addicting and satisfying. You're exploring areas, gathering resources, crafting better gear, unlocking new abilities, and finding secrets everywhere. The semi-open areas give you room to explore and approach situations differently. You can go in stealthy, pick enemies off with arrows, or just start a firefight. The game rewards exploration with cool upgrades and lore that adds to the story. Combat feels really good too. The bow is still the best weapon, and landing headshots is super satisfying. You got different arrow types for different situations, and the stealth kills look brutal. Laura moves fluidly through environments, sliding under obstacles, climbing quickly, and it all feels smooth and responsive. The animations are top tier, and everything flows together naturally. The crafting system adds a nice survival element. You're collecting materials to make ammo, healing items, and special arrows. It's not super deep, but it gives you something to do while exploring and makes you pay attention to your surroundings. Finding resource dashes hidden around the map feels rewarding. Mass Effect 2. So Mass Effect 2 dropped in 2010, and man, this thing is legendary. You start the game by straight up dying, which is a hell of a way to kick things off. Shipwreck gets spaced and Cerberus brings you back to life 2 years later. Now you gotta work with these shady folks to figure out why entire human colonies are vanishing. The whole point of this game is building a crew for what's basically a suicide run. You're flying around the galaxy recruiting the most badass and skilled people you can find. Every single person you bring onto the Normandy has their own baggage and problems. That's where the game really shines because these aren't just random teammates, they're actual people with depth. Those loyalty missions hit different because they matter for the endgame. When you help someone work through their daemons, they become loyal. If they're not loyal when you hit that final mission, they can actually die for good. Knowing that makes every choice feel heavy. You're not just clicking through dialogue, you're building relationships that determine who makes it out alive. Combat got a massive upgrade from the first game. It plays like a proper third-person shooter now with cover mechanics that work smoothly. Using biotic powers to lift enemies, then blasting them feels great. Each class plays totally different, so replaying as a soldier versus an adept is like a fresh experience. Yeah, it's not as deep as dedicated shooters, but it's fun enough that fights don't feel like a chore. They cut a lot of the annoying RPG bloat from the first game. No more inventory management hell or driving the Mako across empty planets for an hour. Some hardcore RPG fans weren't happy, but it lets the game focus on what it does best, which is characters and storytelling. The streamlining works in its favor.
Damn it, Wilson. This room is crawling with mechs.
The whole station is crawling with mechs. I'm doing the best I can.
Mad Max. Mad Max is one of those games, it's kind of underrated when you think about it, but it still holds up pretty well if you know what to appreciate. The first thing that hits you is the world itself. It's massive, dusty, and feels properly post-apocalyptic. Driving across the desert, jumping from one scrap pile to another, or just wandering around the wasteland, you get this real sense of how harsh the world is. There's junk everywhere, old cars, broken buildings, scrap towers, and scavenging it all to build up your car and gear is satisfying in a way few games really capture. It's not flashy like some modern open-world games, but the world has personality. You can tell the developers really wanted to make the wasteland feel lived in, dangerous, and oppressive. Driving is where the game really shines. The magnum opus, your car, feels weighty and powerful. Upgrading it is fun because each upgrade makes a noticeable difference. You can slam through enemies, harpoon their cars, or equip weapons that change how you fight. Vehicle combat is tense and chaotic in a good way. Ramming an enemy convoy while weaving through explosions and shooting out tires never gets old. The way the car handles, especially when you're boosting or trying tricky maneuvers, still feels smooth today. Honestly, if you're not a fan of the driving, a lot of the fun in the game just disappears. But thankfully, most of the game revolves around being behind the wheel. On foot, the combat is fine, but not amazing. Max punches, grabs, and kicks enemies in a brawler-style system that works okay, but it can get repetitive, especially if you spend a lot of time clearing camps. Some of the side missions are repetitive too. Destroy this base, clear that convoy, grab scrap here, but at least they tie into the world logically. You're scavenging, upgrading your car, and surviving, so it fits the theme even if it feels grindy sometimes. Travel on foot can feel slow too, which is why the car is so central. You really notice the game was built around vehicular gameplay first. The story is serviceable, but not its strongest point. Max is dealing with revenge, gangs, and survival, and while there are a few interesting characters, most of them feel one-dimensional. It's the kind of story where you get the idea quickly and then focus more on the action and exploration than the plot itself. That said, the atmosphere supports the story really well. Storms roll in, sand swirls around, and the wasteland feels alive in a way that makes even minor objectives feel dangerous. Graphics and art design are solid for a game that's almost a decade old. The deserts, ruined cities, and scrap towers have this gritty charm. You can tell the designers wanted everything to feel heavy, like this world actually went through something catastrophic. Even the smaller touches, like enemy convoys moving in patterns or the sound of your car crunching over rubble, make the game feel immersive. Mad Max aged like fine wine in certain ways. The driving and car combat are still extremely satisfying, the world feels huge and oppressive, and scavenging for upgrades makes you feel like you're surviving in a real wasteland. The story and on-foot combat aren't amazing, and some side missions drag, but the core systems are solid enough that it's still fun to jump in. It's a game built around the feeling of being in the wasteland, behind the wheel, and battling chaos, and that feeling doesn't really get old. Even now, you can spend hours just exploring, upgrading, and taking down enemy convoys, and it still scratches that itch that's unique to this game. Red Dead Redemption 1.
Marvelous shot, dear boy! The kind of deadly accuracy that can only be afforded by the West Dickens elixir. Come, I have plenty for all!
Red Dead Redemption still feels like stepping into a living, breathing Wild West, and honestly, that's the part that hasn't aged a bit. The world is huge, but it never feels empty. Riding through the plains, deserts, or snowy mountains, you notice little details everywhere. The way animals behave, guards patrolling towns, travelers moving along roads, or even a random stranger calling out for help. You can spend hours just exploring without even touching a main mission and still run into something interesting. Some of those random encounters feel small, like helping someone with a wagon stuck in the mud, but they actually make the world feel alive. Others can turn into full-on, chaotic moments, like running into a bandit gang when you least expect it, and it all just works together. The gameplay is smooth, even today. Riding horses feels natural, and the variety of horses means you can pick one that suits your style, whether you want speed, stamina, or control. Gunplay is satisfying. Shooting, reloading, and aiming in third person has a weight to it, and the Deadeye system still makes combat tense and fun. You can slow down time and target specific body parts, which makes duels and larger fights feel strategic instead of chaotic button mashing. That system alone adds a layer of depth that keeps combat interesting even if you've played the game multiple times. The world design is smart. Towns feel like actual communities with people talking, working, or arguing in the streets. Stores have specific roles, and wandering around makes you notice little touches like random music from a piano in a saloon or a blacksmith hammering away in a workshop. The variety in terrain also keeps exploration exciting. You go from deserts to mountains to swamps, and each area has its own feel, enemies, and wildlife. The attention to detail is ridiculous when you notice it all, and it's one of the reasons the game still holds up.
There it is, skeptics and dissenters, irrefutable proof. Do not let this opportunity pass you by.
Assassin's Creed Unity. Assassin's Creed Unity is one of those games that honestly gets a bad rap, but if you look past the launch problems, a lot of it still works really well today. The parkour and movement are smoother than almost any AC game before it, and Paris is just massive. Walking and running through the streets, jumping across rooftops, and seeing Notre Dame in all its glory is still impressive. The city feels alive, with crowds of NPCs, markets, soldiers patrolling, and little side events happening all around you. Even years later, just wandering through different districts and looking at the architecture can make you feel like you're actually in 18th century Paris. The missions are a mixed bag, but some of the variety is still fun. You've got assassinations, stealth sections, tailing targets, and some of the co-op missions are surprisingly clever. Combat is tighter than in previous AC games, but it can still feel clunky sometimes. Timing counters and parries is important, and the AI occasionally does dumb stuff, like guards noticing you way too late, or suddenly spotting you through a wall. The customization in Unity is really nice. You can change weapons, armor, and outfits, and it actually feels meaningful because it changes stats and playstyle. Upgrading gear is rewarding, and the way gear interacts with movement and combat gives you more options in approaching missions. Side missions, crafting, and collectibles are there if you like to explore, though some of the side stuff can feel a bit repetitive, like clearing all the newspaper deliveries or murdering the same type of guards over and over again. Unity also has flaws that can't be ignored. The launch was infamous for bugs and glitches, some of which still pop up if you play certain versions today. There are moments where NPCs behave strangely or animations clip in weird ways. Parkour, while smoother than past games, can occasionally misjudge jumps or ledges, which can be frustrating if you're going for precision. The story isn't the strongest in the series either. It has good moments, especially with Arno and the personal revenge plot, but it's not as compelling as other entries like AC2 or Black Flag. Even with all that, Unity aged better than most people give it credit for. Paris itself is a masterpiece of level design. The verticality, the streets, the crowds, it makes traversal fun in a way few games can replicate. The sense of freedom, being able to climb almost anything and move across rooftops, is still satisfying today. And when the combat and stealth flow together, the game hits that sweet spot where you feel clever for planning your approach, sneaking around, and taking down multiple targets efficiently. Assassin's Creed Unity aged like fine wine in parts because it leaned into what the series does best: open world exploration, vertical parkour, and emergent gameplay while giving you a massive living city that still feels alive. It's rough around the edges, and the story and AI aren't perfect, but there's a lot to enjoy if you take the time to wander, climb, and explore Paris. For all the criticism it gets, the core experience of running across the city, planning assassinations, and just feeling like you're a part of the world still works today. Uncharted 4. So Uncharted 4 came out in 2016, and this is basically Naughty Dog showing everyone how it's done. This was Nathan Drake's send-off, and they went all out to make sure his final adventure was perfect. Right away, you can tell this game looks incredible. The graphics are absolutely insane, the environments are massive and detailed, from Madagascar markets to lush jungles to this pirate colony called Libertalia. Water looks realistic, the lighting is phenomenal, and the character models are so detailed you can see every wrinkle and expression. Even years later, this thing is a visual showcase. The story hits way harder than previous Uncharted games. Nathan's older now, he's trying to live a normal life with Elena, but he's clearly bored. Then his brother Sam shows up, who was supposedly dead, and suddenly Drake is pulled back into the treasure hunting life. The whole game explores themes about obsession and letting go of the past. It's more mature and thoughtful than just being a fun action romp. The gameplay is the most polished it's ever been in the series. Drake moves fluidly, the shooting feels tight, and they added a grappling hook that changes everything. Swinging across gaps and using it in combat to zip around makes traversal way more dynamic. The rope adds verticality to fights and lets you approach encounters differently. Speaking of combat, you can actually go full stealth in this one. The arenas are bigger with tall grass and multiple paths. You can sneak through entire sections without firing a shot if you're careful. Or you can go loud and get into these intense shootouts. Having that flexibility makes replaying encounters fun because you can try different approaches. The set pieces are jaw-dropping, but they feel more grounded than previous games. There's still crazy moments like the car chase through Madagascar or the collapsing clock tower, but nothing feels too over the top. Everything has weight and consequence. When a building crumbles, you really feel the danger. Level design is way more open than before. You get these huge areas to explore with optional paths and hidden treasures everywhere. Madagascar especially gives you this big space where you're just driving around with Sam looking for clues. It's slower paced, but it lets you soak in the atmosphere and have conversations that build the characters. The pacing overall is different from other Uncharted games. There's more downtime between action sequences where you're just talking or exploring. Some people found it slow, but it makes the big moments hit harder. You're not on this constant adrenaline rush. There's time to breathe and reflect. Those quiet moments are some of the best parts. There's a whole chapter where young Nathan and Sam are just exploring their childhood home. It's pure character development with no action, and it's fantastic. Or the scene where Nate and Elena are playing Crash Bandicoot on the couch. These human moments make you care about what happens to these people. Libertalia as a location is fascinating. This whole pirate utopia that fell apart due to greed and betrayal. Exploring the ruins and piecing together what happened through environmental storytelling is engaging. The architecture is beautiful in a decayed cliched way, and it ties into the game's themes about obsession destroying everything. Technically, the game is a monster. Loading screens are hidden brilliantly, the frame rate stays smooth even during intense moments, and everything just works. The attention to detail is crazy, like how Drake's shirt gets dirty or wet depending on the environment, or how characters realistically grab ledges and surfaces. Playing through Uncharted 4 feels like the ultimate refinement of everything Naughty Dog learned over the years. The climbing is smooth, the shooting is satisfying, the stealth works well, and the story keeps you hooked. It's the most complete package in the series. What makes it age so well is that it was already pushing boundaries when it came out. The graphics were top tier then, and they're still impressive now. The storytelling was mature and thoughtful, which doesn't get dated. The gameplay mechanics are polished enough that nothing feels clunky going back to it. God of War 3. Okay, so God of War 3, even so many years later, still has that epic feel, mostly because it throws you into massive set pieces and insane battles from the moment you start. The combat is tight, brutal, and satisfying. Kratos feels powerful in a way few characters do. Every swing of the Blades of Exile, every grab, and every combo lands with a weight that makes the fights feel visceral. Boss fights are still incredible today. They're huge, over the top, and creative, and figuring out how to beat some of them is actually fun instead of just mashing buttons. The mix of puzzles, platforming, and combat keeps things from feeling repetitive too much, even if the core combat loop is pretty consistent throughout the game. The world design is a big reason it holds up. Ancient Greece feels massive and mythological in a way that's visually impressive even today. From Olympus to the underworld, the locations are huge, detailed, and full of environmental hazards that actually make traversal interesting. Some of the platforming sections are tricky, and honestly, some can be annoying if you mess up a jump, but they also add tension and break up the combat nicely. The scale of the environments, combined with the epic cutscenes and camera angles, still makes the game feel cinematic and grand. Even now, going back and playing through the battles, climbing massive statues, or smashing through hordes of enemies feels satisfying in a way that few older games manage. God of War 3 holds up because it doesn't rely on trends or modern mechanics. It's pure spectacle, tight gameplay, and epic storytelling rolled into one. It's a little rough in spots, with some repetitive combat and filler, but the experience as a whole is still exciting, grand, and memorable. That's why, years later, it's easy to see why people still remember this one fondly. Sleeping Dogs. Sleeping Dogs is one of my most favorite games of all time, mostly because it does a lot of things differently than other games. First off, the city is amazing. Hong Kong feels alive in a way that's hard to explain. You've got busy streets, narrow alleyways, glowing neon signs, markets with vendors, and random people walking around doing their own thing. Sometimes you just stop for a second and notice how detailed everything is. The way traffic moves, how people react if you bump into them, or even small fights breaking out in the streets. It's not perfect, but it feels lived in, and that makes exploring really satisfying. The movement and combat are where the game shines. Fighting isn't about guns the whole time. You mostly punch, kick, counter, and throw people around, and chaining moves together feels really rewarding. You can do a quick dodge and follow it up with a grab or a kick, and when you pull off a big combo, it feels satisfying. There's a rhythm to the fights, and even though it can get a little repetitive if you do a lot of the same encounters, it's still more engaging than just shooting at enemies all the time. The parkour and rooftop sections also had a lot. You can jump across roofs, climb walls, swing off ledges, and chase someone or escape the cops in ways that feel fluid and fun. Driving is a mixed bag. The cars are okay, but sometimes they feel a little floaty, and it can get frustrating when you're trying to weave through traffic during a chase. The story keeps things interesting, even if it's not super deep. You're Wei Shan, an undercover cop trying to bring down the triads from the inside. Some characters are over the top, and a few cutscenes get dramatic in a silly way, but the main arc works because you feel tension being undercover. You're caught between doing what's right and keeping your cover, and that moral tension actually makes the missions more engaging. You care a little more about fights and choices because it isn't just random chaos. It feels like you're living in this world and reacting to it. There are flaws, of course. Some side missions can get repetitive, like clearing small gang hideouts or delivering items. Certain collectibles feel boring to track down, and the AI can act dumb at times. Enemies sometimes notice you too late or too quickly, and civilians will occasionally move in ways that break immersion. But these flaws are minor compared to what the game gets right. The combat, movement, city design, and freedom to explore more than make up for them. The world design is a big reason this game still works. Every district has a different vibe. Some are bustling markets, some are high-rise office areas, and some are cramped alleys filled with crime. The day-night cycle, weather effects, and small random events all make it feel alive. You can chase a target across rooftops, fight your way through a busy street, and then jump into a car and drive through traffic while avoiding pedestrians and cops. That mix of vertical movement, street-level chaos, and driving is unique and still fun today. So yeah, overall, the combat is still satisfying, the city's still alive, and exploring or messing around never really gets old. It's not perfect, story isn't super deep, side missions can feel repetitive, and AI isn't perfect, but the core systems are solid enough that you can still hop in and have a good time. Running across rooftops, jumping into fights, and exploring the city makes the game feel alive, and that's why it still works years later. Max Payne 3.
Knock down!
So Max is older now, completely wrecked by booze and painkillers, and he's basically a shell of who he used to be. The noir atmosphere from the first two games is mostly gone. Now you're in sunny Sao Paulo, Brazil, which is this crazy contrast. But it works because Max is this dark, broken dude stumbling through this bright, colorful world, and it just emphasizes how out of place he is. Max is working private security for this wealthy family, and of course everything goes sideways immediately. People get kidnapped, Max screws up, more people die, and he's just drowning in guilt the whole time. The narrative jumps around between different time periods, which keeps you guessing about what actually happened. It's noir storytelling, but updated for a more modern, cynical vibe. The gunplay though? Oh man, the gunplay is phenomenal. Rockstar took the bullet time mechanic and polished it to perfection. Diving through the air in slow motion while precisely picking off enemies never gets old. Level design is really strong too. You're fighting through nightclubs, favelas, office buildings, airports, even a freaking stadium. Each environment is detailed and destructible, cover gets shredded by gunfire, and there's multiple paths through most encounters. The game keeps throwing you new scenarios at you so it doesn't get repetitive. Also, what's interesting is how divisive this game was with fans. Some people loved the new direction, others hated that it moved away from the noir aesthetic of the originals. I get both sides, but I think what Rockstar did works. They kept the core gameplay intact while updating everything else for a modern audience. Max as a character here is fascinating because he's not cool or aspirational, he's pathetic and self-destructive. He keeps making terrible decisions, drinking himself stupid, and getting people killed. But you stick with him because underneath all that mess, there's still a guy trying to do the right thing even when he knows it's pointless. That airport level is absolutely insane, by the way. You're fighting through this huge shootout that just keeps escalating. The pacing of that sequence is perfect, building tension until it explodes into chaos. It's one of those levels you remember long after finishing the game. Max Payne 3 also looks incredible on PC if you got the hardware. Rockstar's optimization was solid, and cranking everything to max settings makes it a visual showcase. Even the console versions look great for 2012. What makes this game age well is that the shooting mechanics are just fundamentally excellent. Graphics can get dated, but satisfying gunplay lasts forever. Diving through the air in bullet time while dual-wielding guns will always be fun. That doesn't change. Max Payne 3 proved that Rockstar could take someone else's series and make it their own while respecting what came before. It's a different beast from the original games, but it's still excellent in its own right. That's why it's aged so well, because at its core, it's just a really well-made shooter with style and substance.